The man you see on your screen is not really here. He's a figment of your imagination.
Whoa! Oh my God!
Just kidding. He's not here. Where is
Well, I
he?
hope the rest of you can see him because welcome to this episode of the 800's. That is my supposed co-host, Adam, and I am your fellow co-host, Alex. And a special shout out to our man, Alan, behind the scenes, making it all happen. Uh, almost on time this time. But thanks everybody for joining us, and why don't we just get right into the plugs? I'm excited to talk about this book.
Yeah, sure thing. So if you joined us for our pretty faces on the screen moments, you heard some music. That music was Fearless First from Incompetech. They make all sorts of cool scores and tunes. You should check them out. Go to incompetech.filmmusic.io. Oh, that was rough. Let me say it again. Incompetech.filmmusic.io. That was more audible. Check out all their scores. Also, Audible. I'm a big audiobook listener. I use Audible primarily. You should too. If you'd like to try it out, check out dmstable.com/audible and sign up for a 1-month free trial and 1 free book. Also, we have a YouTube channel. Link is below the video. You should check that out. We post all of our videos there. This one, our podcast, some other stuff. Check it out. It's good stuff. Patreon. We have Patreon that's also below the video. Check that out. That's how we do our book voting. So if you want to vote on what book we read next, check out the Patreon link. Maybe throw us a couple of bucks and vote on what you want to read. And finally, I wanted to mention Etsy. We have an Etsy page. Alan has started making some dope-ass nerd shit. And you should check it out. That's dmstable.com/Etsy. I'll also post that in the chat so you guys have a convenient link.
And a special note for a limited time only, we are doing Everybody Gets a Vote month. So that's right. Everybody, your mom, your dad, your uncle, your sister, that crazy dude down the street, they can all vote and tell us what to read. So, bring all your friends around, even if they aren't usually into this sort of thing. Help them wield the power of the vote. We like to get outside our comfort zone, so maybe that'll be one way that we do that. But that's just for a limited time. Otherwise, it is Patreon subscribers only. Anyways, this week on the 800s, we'll be discussing the sci-fi horror novel Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. In the vast emptiness of space, a beacon repair crew, led by Claire Kovalik, receives a distress signal. On a whim and a reluctance to go home and be fired, the crew follows the signal to find the Aurora, a luxury space cruiser lost on its maiden voyage, yet no one knows why. Claire and the crew board in the hopes of claiming the treasures within, but all they find is dead silence.
Hey-oh! And a couple of dead bodies, but...
Hey, there's emphasis on dead.
If this is your first time joining us, a quick rundown of how our show works. Alex and I are going to be chit-chatting back and forth about topics. Those topics hopefully come from you guys. If you have something you want to talk about this book, throw it in the chat at any time. We keep a close eye on the chat. We'll snag it if you say, hey, I want to talk about this, or what did you think about that? And then we'll snag it and say, hey, what did you guys think about this or that? So-and-so wants to talk about it. And then we'll throw it up on the screen. Alex and I will talk about it, and then we'll hit up some comments and see what you guys think. So, yeah, otherwise we'll just talk back and forth amongst each other, ourselves, and Alex is pretty entertaining, but I'm pretty boring, so make sure you put out some chatter there, so we have something to chat about. Keep it alive.
Give yourself some credit, son. Half the time it's mostly just because you're tired because you're a dad. Anyways, we need that dad energy. Also, just a quick disclaimer: we are a show geared towards adults. We cover adult topics, and while we try not to rely on it too much, we do swear, as Adam demonstrated earlier. So bring bring kids around at your own discretion. And also, we here at DM's Table are trying to create a fun and supportive atmosphere and a place where people can share their interests and hobbies with no fear of reprisal or judgment. So, in sum, be nice or bug off.
I'm assuming VS Drake is referencing the "Be Nice or Fuck Off" for that.
I wonder if I can't see it with the reflection, but it's on there.
You need a fuller glass.
Well, it's not that, it's the ring light that's getting me. Anyway.
Oh, no. I don't have my bookmark with me, so I can't. I don't have a cup either.
Anyway. I've got them all around somewhere. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and get started then with our first impressions?
Sure thing. So this was a sci-fi spooky town book. It's kind of right up my alley, so I was pretty excited right from the get-go. Great set up, in my opinion. It set the mood of the story really well. You got some important details about the characters right off the bat, like Claire kind of being a little depressed about what's going to happen with her life. But yeah, I was really excited to dive right into this one.
Well, for one, I don't read a lot of horror because honestly, like, sci-fi horror might be where I would lean into it more, but I don't read a lot of horror just because when I read a lot of them, it tends to get like a bit predictable for me. Whereas this one, I thought it was nice that it started off by kind of setting the tone in a kind of different way than I'm used to with horror. Because usually horror, what they do is they set up this juxtaposition of everything's fine and dandy when suddenly something is introduced. Whereas this starts off kind of dark to begin with and does a good job of kind of setting the stage, I think, for, like you said, each of the characters get enough of a background so you have an idea of the type of character that they are going in. And which is pretty typical for horror movies and books, is to like characters fit an archetype, but these archetypes weren't quite as clear. They were there, but they weren't as clear cut, which allows the characters to kind of evolve a bit as the story goes along, rather than being, here's the guy who's going to die first. Here's the jerk who you hope dies, but makes it way longer than you think he should. And here's the main character who has plot armor up the wazoo. And like, and this book didn't lean into that too much, which I appreciated. And it was a compelling enough setup that it had me doing the thing that I do like to do with horror movies and books, and that's start trying to predict everything. I'll admit, like, that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
It's just that when I'm right too early too often, that's when it becomes a problem. And I wasn't quite with this one, which I'll explain why as we go on. But that's what my first impressions were leading in. Let's go to chat for a little bit.
Yeah, VS Drake says tone was set well. Kind of same thing I was saying there. Good pace, kept moving. Storm. I like the thought that Storm had with it could have been just somebody laying in a hospital bed, imagining the whole thing. That kind of makes you wonder, like, where do you draw the line between what happened and what didn't?
I definitely want to get into that. In fact, that's one of my major points and one of the things I really loved about this book going forward. But I think it goes a lot to what Stormy said at the beginning, is setting a good background for Claire to set that seed of doubt from the beginning. and her doubt becomes a proxy for our own doubt in the story, and her inability to know for sure what's real and what's not, while still having the tools to push through, is only because of the background that was set up at the beginning. And I thought that was honestly brilliantly done, because that's what kept me guessing through the whole thing, is that question of, is it all in her head? Is this going to be dream sequence? Is it going to be she's actually been the killer all along? Is it going to be, is it the aliens that they were postulating at one point, or is it going to be something else entirely? And that was only done because of the way that Claire was handled, and how little things are placed here and there, like the time she hears her mom screaming for the first time. Like, just that little seed of doubt allows us to continue through the story without being like, yep, I got it. There's nothing that's going to surprise me. There's nothing scary about this,
Yeah. I will admit too, like the mom scenes kind of make it harder to determine what's actually causing this, because the mom scenes happen no matter where Claire is, and no matter the state of the engine or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was an interesting touch, a nice twist, I think. But V.S. Drake says, what did you think about how the author wielded that tool of distrust in the main character's reality?
Honestly, like I said, I think that was one of my favorite parts of this book, is how well how well S.A. Barnes took Claire and how she was dealing with like an insanely deep trauma, being left on your own for a month as a kid, surviving in, a space like an extraterrestrial colony, is nuts. Like, coming back from that, like, again, like, I have something more of appreciation this than the average bear because of my psychology background, but I thought it was a really good balance of the way that people who deal with these hallucinations and stuff live a day-to-day life when it's like PTSD, or if it is schizophrenia or something else entirely. Hard to know, because when you add space to things, that's something we don't experience on a regular basis, so we probably don't even have like a DSM diagnosis for anything out there. But whatever it is that she's dealing with, I thought it was really well done about like how she was given these tools to deal with them, which ultimately are the reason why she's able to push through when nobody else really is. But it also did a good job of showing the stigma that comes along with it, how she copes with it, and allows her to learn and grow from it as well, which is a tough thing to do in a horror book,
Yeah, definitely.
Like, actual character growth. What? Yeah, and if she didn't have those tools, like V.S. Drake said, she doesn't have those tools to teach her crewmates, which are the only reason why she, isn't absolutely alone by the end of the story. I guess she'd never be truly alone. Her mom would be there. But
I really enjoyed, especially the first few times where something happens. Like a good example of this is the lady under the bed,
mm-hmm.
who comes out and scratches at her and grabs her ankle, and those scenes are so like hard-hitting scenes where Claire is certain it's happening, and she is terrified, and you feel that terror, and then she's like, oh, wait a minute, that didn't just happen.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Like, the fact that we can feel her terror in those moments and how she deals with it. Again, it becomes a proxy for how we deal with these things as readers, and helps us through it. It allows us to live through her fear, which is, it's not just, I'm scared. It is this deep visceral thing for her that goes far beyond just the situation, and the unknown of it all in and of itself becoming scary, and not just letting that being a lingering in the background, but kind of bringing it to the forefront without being too direct about it, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, honestly, I love the way that was done. And Stormy brings up a good point. The fact that she couldn't hear hiccups. Uh, the fact that she couldn't hear well. Little details like that wind up being huge as to why she's able to handle things that other people aren't, despite this thing that is typically seen as a detriment.
So do you think her I see dead people power is a power or a mental condition?
I think it is a mental condition. The closest thing to a power is her ability to cope with it. Again, that's through those years and years of therapy. I don't think it's necessarily a power, because I know the power of suggestion when it comes to hallucination, and it's pretty easy for our brains to like fill in with things that we've seen. And I think the author was actually pretty careful never to have anybody envision anything that they hadn't witnessed at some point. And I was trying, I read the book, like the physical book, and I also listened to the audiobook, and I was during the audiobook kind of keeping track of that. And I personally didn't catch anywhere where somebody saw something that they had never seen before, or that wasn't some kind of amalgamation of like things put together into something, which our brain can kind of do. That's how you end up seeing like new people that you've never met in your dreams, is they're basically just like shit your brain took from random people you saw on the street and just kind of cobbled together.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty interesting detail to put in there to show that if you're keeping track, how like you can tell that these are probably hallucinations, is that there's nothing shared that wasn't based in some small detail of reality. There was no just something out of nowhere that nobody could possibly imagine that just showed up, and I really honestly liked that detail, especially when I read it through the second time and realized like how well that was taken care of.
It really makes you wonder, the more careful essay Barnes was to not mention things that Claire couldn't have known, the more you wonder if it's real or not. The only one that comes to mind for me that is questionable is the jerk guy from the company. At one point, she describes his dad before they go back to the ship. While they're trying to talk her into it, she describes his dad.
Well, I assumed that was just because he's a high up enough exec that it's just kind of like he's a known figure type of thing. Because they kind of play it like that. They're like, oh, I didn't realize you're related to that guy. That guy I know.
Yeah.
And when they had that moment, I was like, oh, okay. So, like, I don't know. Like, it feels like one of those kinds of things where, you get high enough up and you start promoting yourself, especially with these, like, mega corporations where you're essentially just, like, you're, like, basically mini oligarchs,
Yeah.
And so that is like you said, that's probably the most questionable bit in there as to whether or not she actually knows him. I just assumed because of the company ties that she would know, especially considering the fact that she was, kind of like a poster child for a little while. So she probably met some people, even though
Yeah.
she was eventually just kind of shoved to the side.
That's what I think is cool about that moment is it's not something that she explicitly knows, but it's something that she could feasibly have known.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a surprising amount of subtlety in this stuff, and like you said, even the stuff where she's not mentioning things lends itself to the doubt that allows you to keep the suspense in this book, which honestly I thought was really cool. So I go a little bit through chat. We got some interesting stuff going on there. VS Drake mentions witnessing. There's a good point here about witnessing the true horror of losing that many people and just not knowing how. I thought that was kind of pretty well done, the way that they discuss things, but and preface this by saying we're terrible with character names when they're not the main character. But that one guy who was just like, oh, it'll be fine. There's no way that they did this or that. And I'm like, how can you be so dismissive of like what happened when A, you weren't there, and B, 600 plus people just fucking vanished.
Yeah.
What did you think about that little exchange?
I mean, kind of like what Storm said. They decided it's okay as long as we get the salvage fee. Like the greed overshadowed the grief.
Yeah, and I think for the people who wind up on because they again, S.A. Barnes sets this up in the beginning of these are generally speaking not your cream of the crop.
Yeah.
Going out on these far out missions to do nothing but beacon repairs, and so it makes sense that they would probably prioritize the chance at a big windfall over, risk to their lives.
Yeah. So VS Drake pitched, what did you think about the usage of the ghost ship trope?
I like that it works the way that it does because it's specifically in space, gives it a little extra creep factor for me. Just because there's all of these, there's enough known elements about how ghost ships work in on Earth, is there's only so many things that could have gone wrong, and then you start turning to magic. Whereas in space, there's so many potential unknowns out there, literally an infinite amount of them, that it allows for, again, a little more of that doubt to seep in about like what actually happened. And, there were some predictable parts to it, admittedly. But that's anytime that happen, anytime you're using something that is well enough known as a trope, there's going to be certain elements that you use because they work.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're tropes.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something primarily scary about something man-made, especially a vessel of some sort that seems to be unmanned when that condition is supposed to never occur.
Well, yeah, they talk about how redundancies are made to save lives in space, and like for that many lives to be lost, like what the fuck had to fail for like that many times for that to happen?
Yeah. I like the Titanic vibes. The instant they were like It's a luxury ship. What popped in my head was Titanic. Because, like, that's what the Titanic was. It was like, oh, yeah, check out this
Well, also lost on
fine-ass
its
ship.
maiden voyage, so.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the smokestacks are exactly what
Yeah.
I imagine with the spaceship. It's like, oh yeah, we don't need smokestacks. We're a spaceship. Well, put them on there anyway.
We put them on there for no reason.
Oh man.
Yeah, but I think that's just kind of like the iconic look for, your typical like luxury cruiser. It's pretty easy to go there with your mind, and I think it does again set a tone for like how cataclysmic also something had to be to like kill everybody.
Yeah.
Because even when the Titanic went down, not everybody died. you know.
Yeah, the Titanic wasn't in space though.
Again, like that's where the ship in space thing kind of lends itself to other stuff going wrong. But I get. Sorry, I'm reading through chat here. Oh, so iSlux was throwing me off. I don't. I got locked in on that before I saw the LOL is Lux. Okay. So let's
The literal
see.
corporate wars that were had. What
Okay,
did you
so
think? What did you
go
think
ahead.
about the corporate wars?
That were had. Honestly, that was probably the most predictable bit for me. Was the setup of here are these mega corporations that have basically been whittled down to like all but monopolies. Like they literally compared them to, Rockefeller and
Yeah.
his crew back in the day, which were basically monopolies in their right, and they said this went even beyond that. So it got a little predictable about how like these people will do literally anything to stay in power and to control their resources. And it that was the part for me where I was just like, if this isn't an alien, it's some fuckery with the corporation she works for. Like that's the bit that I picked out at the very beginning. And the one thing I didn't get, I will say, is I predicted that whatever was used on that ship was tested where Claire was
Oh yeah.
abandoned. I just assumed it was going to be a weapon that was tested there. She somehow survived, and when they weren't expecting it, but they couldn't just fucking off her. And then whatever it was wound up on that ship. Like I was like, it's either that or it's something extraterrestrial. Like, like whatever it is, So but I think it was handled reasonably well. All of the actions that were taken were predictable because they're things that, greedy fucking assholes would do. You know, like like people who are so disconnected from anybody and profiteering is all that matters.
Yeah, I definitely had that same thought that you had with like maybe this is linked to Claire's settlement. But then I was like, what drew me away from that thought was that was clearly a biological agent and probably wouldn't have survived the 20 years in vacuum. So I was like, it's gotta be something mechanical or
Well,
something nefarious,
I mean, maybe, but not necessarily, because they actually do a good job of setting up how things in that environment could have survived. If it was just them, like they had the water reciprocators, they had the grass or whatever. So
the fake grass, the AstroTurf.
yeah, they had the fake grass set up, but they used that as as like a means to discuss like how that sort of thing might have survived. Had obviously excluding the fact that like we eventually find out that anything in there that was living would have frozen. But the other thing that I was thinking is that if it was biological, what if they created some sort of energy being, like that kind of thing flew into my head. But again, what if they created on accident the first like actual ghost,
Yeah, V.S. Drake mentioned the scene where what's his face decided to drink champagne from the ship as soon as they turned it back on. Like, what the fuck, dude?
And they just let him. I was like, somebody slapped the bottle out of his hand. Somebody slapped the bottle out of his hand. Somebody slapped the bottle out of his hand. And he's like, nope, this is gross. And that's all there was to it. God damn it. That's the shit that gets you killed.
Yeah. Stormy asked, how did they pick Claire to go back to Earth for help? They kind of touched on that a little bit in the book. They said it was even odds of survival. Stay with the ship that has atmosphere, or go in the escape pod that has limited air. And both of them have very minimal chance of finding help.
Well,
so I think
it was that, and they left Kane there, who actually has the technological know-how about how to like restore systems and stuff on that ship, whereas she didn't. She knew how to fly the escape pod, but she didn't know how to do anything to maintain that ship, and so it made sense for her to go and for him to stay, because he could actually actively help his own situation, whereas if she was left behind, she couldn't.
Yeah. Which I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect, that they specifically mention redundancies in training, but that no person could take over fully for another person.
Well, they mentioned redundancies in space, and not necessarily in the training, just in like the protocols.
Well, Claire specifically mentions at one point that their training was redundantly overlapping.
Oh, I thought you were pointing out like a full-on like here's a plot hole thing, not a like. I thought you meant like it says this and it says this. These can't intersect. I misinterpreted what you said. What you're saying is that they overlap like this, but there's never any full like somebody can take over for another job. And I remember reading about that and thinking, man, this corporation really, really doesn't want anybody to be able to move up without them having any say so. Like, nobody is going to get this on the merit of just knowing more. It's only because we let you. It's not because you can do more. And I was like, whoever is at the top of this corporation is the biggest control freak fucking ever. And a sociopath, but that's been proven pretty much.
I think part of it was nobody can leave with their knowledge and start their own company because they don't have enough.
Yeah, great point. Honestly, like that's probably like the main bit is just like you can't do this without us was like what they ultimately want. It's like you can do this together, but you can't do this without us being at the center of it. So what I would like to ask about though is, what did you think was the creepiest thing in this book?
What was the creepiest thing in the book? No, I'm sticking with my previous answer. Lady under the bed. Preys upon a primal childhood fear of the thing under the bed. Better not hang your foot out because the thing under your bed's going to get it. So make sure you're covered up.
You'd be surprised how many adults I know who still have that fear. And like, I'm sitting here at like 6'1", and I'm like, it's hard for me not to have my feet hang over the bed.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like that's such a like cultural norm, and to have it thrown in this book was a good move.
See, V.S. Drake right there. Don't stick a foot off, never. And I'm just sitting here to like, I've had full out on like legs hanging off the bed. I don't care. I think for me, the creepiest part for me was actually not anything that they found, but was the parts where Claire's self-doubt became the strongest. Her self-doubt about, is this real or is it just me? And the idea that she might, especially when the idea that this was her fault started bleeding into, am I causing this? And I thought the way that they described how she was feeling in those moments to me, and then to have that cut to where she's basically being interrogated and being gaslit about her situation, you know, that to me was like, I don't know, that gave me the most creeps. Is just like, she's defending it here, but she's not there. And I don't know, it was confusing and fucking infuriating and scary all at once. And then when it cuts right back again to the part where, yeah, I think that's actually right before they go and they find that room with like the 3 dead bodies, including the one under the bed, is to have that all right in a row. I thought that was like such a creepy sequence. And it wasn't like any individual thing. It was the specific sequence of, I'm having all this doubt on my own. This doubt is being reinforced by this jack-off, but in the most infuriating way. And then back to this portion where all of that doubt kind of comes to a head in, you know, confronting some very real horrors on that ship. You know, that and the dude who just clearly had the what was it? Like he had scraped his own eyes out. That one got me. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like there's this idea that like you would inflict that pain on yourself, and the fact that she was willing to say like, that's not real, like that, you know, this could be on me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on in your head where you think you could make that? and that to me was almost the creepiest. But yeah, like the, you know, so let's see. Yeah, when the lights came on for the first time.
V.S. Drake says, I think the dead floating in the atrium, and then Storm agreed that part is which yeah, that would be quite the sight to think the atrium's completely empty and then you look up and find it's completely full.
Oh yeah. Oh god. I think the only reason that made that a little less impactful is just because they don't go into great detail about like what they're seeing there, and it's just kind of floating dead bodies as opposed to these like the one that Storm brings up, the full-on screwdriver to the temple. Like, I mean, that still I think would be, at least with the screwdriver, I would think you would get to the dead part faster than it clawing your eyes out, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Oh man. Tired of it?
Yeah, a little bit. V.S. Drake says no one ever thinks of the space above you. Funny thing I read this week about space is like, of all the movies with space battles and all the shows with space battles and all the books with space battles, why are all the ships always oriented the same way?
Well, they even talk about it in this book, how there's no up or down in space. Like, they literally say that outright. And, there's really only one movie book series I know that tackles that very head on, and that's Ender's Game. But, it's a good point. Like, I think we do it just because that's the easiest way for an audience to, at least in a movie, to visualize stuff, because that's just how we are.
Yeah.
Like, even in this book, when they mention that there is no up or down in space, like, they talk about how hard it is to reorient yourself that way, even when you've experienced it. And I guarantee you, nobody here has experienced it. So, I understand why it's not like used all that often, but realistically, I've read stuff about this where, if there were real, like, military space cruisers, guns would be basically in any direction. They would. I think it was like I think the article that I read was something along the lines of like the brilliance of the Borg cube or something like that, where basically spaceships don't have to do anything other than be able to access all sides at all times. And like a cube or a sphere works perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But anyways, back on track and back to the book. The space cruiser thing, I imagine a lot of that is just, if you want luxury, you don't want to confuse your guests, so you go with what they're familiar with. That makes sense to me, If you're doing it for sheer practicality, yeah, it's not going to look like that. But for this, it makes sense to make it look like luxury is to look like what they're familiar with.
The Lost Fleet by Jack Campbell. I've read that. It's a good book.
All right. So. Oh, and the helmet at the front of the ship thing. Yeah. I mean, depends on, I guess, the nature of the technology and what you're able to see and not.
If you're doing it all through cameras, which it kind of sounded like they were, then
it could be anywhere.
Doesn't need to be anywhere particular.
No, but I imagine you'd want to keep it away from the general public, which wherever that ends up being, and not anywhere close to something that would explode. So yeah, so between, other than that, it's wherever. I do like that this book didn't get too bogged down in that. They set up a viable reason for this cruise liner to look a certain way and just leave it at that, and and then add in the bits that lent itself to the book and didn't get too sidetracked, because it's really easy with sci-fi to get just sidetracked in the technology or whatever sci-fi bullshit's going on, and it never really did that, which I actually appreciated.
Yeah. Storm says the amount of time to get to Earth and back seems like it would be too long for people to survive on the ship. While aspects of that were addressed, what do you think about long-term space survival?
Honestly, if you have a lot of these things, like they said, are built to have those redundancies so that if something goes wrong, you have a long period of time where you could survive and hopefully, send out a distress beacon. In space, that's a little tricky because, being a degree off on a course correction of several billion miles means you miss the person by several million miles. So it's kind of a bigger deal when that stuff happens. So it makes sense that they would have a lot of provisions for that. And considering the fact that everything went haywire so early and so fast, it makes sense that there would be a lot left over. They didn't have to go into it again in too much detail, but there was enough discussion about it that I thought it seemed plausible, especially with a guy who knows like how ship systems work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think the bit that they tackle that I thought was arguably the most unrealistic is the mental aspect of it, especially staying alone. It is insanely hard for humans to stay alone, like that level of alone for that long in the best of circumstances, let alone when you are padding your room with several hundred mattresses and actively fighting off auditory and visual hallucinations that are external, let alone internal.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it would be tough. I think something that kind of gets glossed over a little bit in this book is that the people on Claire's crew were with that select group of people for years at a time. And that seems like that would be extremely difficult to have only that contact for that long.
I mean, that's something that's done on ships, though. It's not easy, but it can be done. And they do say like it's not like they spent like that years, like she specifically chose crews that weren't all the same all the time, so the time they spent together was as minimal as possible. But hello, can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I saw that in chat. I don't know what happened there. I think it's plausible. It's difficult, but again, there's a reason why most people don't want those fucking far out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere types of missions that Claire does. Is most people, yeah, that's very difficult for them, and Claire specifically likes it because it means she has less shit to deal with. Which again is another good shot. A good way of like setting her up as the kind of character that can deal with this stuff. The 60-year-old food bit, again, I don't think they were necessarily surviving off of like the luxury food when they were dealing with that. My guess is that they probably have a shit ton of luxury food, but all of their survival food is probably like dried rations. Like,
well, they do mention they have a machine that makes food. All they needed was protein, and it makes food for them.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by like dried rations is you have something that is very easy to produce that doesn't have. I was trying to like give it a like viable equivalent that actually exists nowadays. It's not so much what they were using, but like it's the equivalent of dried rations that can last for an extremely long time because they're dehydrated, and if they're properly sealed, yeah, it's probably not going to taste great, but the nutrients are still going to be there. And especially if you only have to store pure proteins, and then it can reassemble them into anything for you.
And in the vacuum of space, bacteria probably cannot eat away at your food.
I don't know, with that many dead bodies laying around. Just kind of funking up the place.
Try old canned food. No, I don't have to.
Yeah, but that's canned food. There's liquid in those things. That's the problem. That's where the bacteria grows. And I have tried old MREs, like, fucking gross. I thought that stuff was handled relatively well without getting too bogged down in the minutia of it. Again, I think the most unrealistic parts would probably be like, what are the odds somebody is going to mentally be able to handle that? But even then, they gave reasons for why the people who made it through. Speaking of which, what were some parts about this book that didn't work for you?
Good question. Good question. Yes. The one thing that comes to mind is that when they returned to the ship, it seemed to be implied that the soldiers that went with them knew that there was a good chance they were going to die there and intentionally die there. I find it hard to believe that with that likelihood of it being like almost certain that you're going to die, like how much do they get paid to be convinced to do that?
Well, I think that was a little tough, but I think they set it up as kind of like, if you do this, you, like, generationally speaking, you'll be set. And it's kind of easy to find people who are that down on their luck, but have people depending on them who are willing to take crazy ass borderline kamikaze missions like that. Or, there are some people that are just that greedy, but you between greed and desperation, you can find people who will do that. Well, the one thing I do think you bring up a good point on, though, is like, I don't know that they would necessarily be that zealous in doing their jobs the way these dudes were. But for me, I think the part that was the toughest for me to deal with was probably the way that the book ended. Just like, I know that, like, when you're dealing with sci-fi horror, it's not going to have necessarily the same quick resolution that like a hack 'em and slash 'em does, and you typically kind of, after delving into these terrible depths, want to bring your reader back up a little bit towards the end. That part was done a little bit slow with a little bit more exposition than I needed. I also don't fully know what the the romance didn't add all that much for me, other than kind of humanizing Claire a bit. And I think that could have been done in other ways, and it didn't necessarily need to be the romance bit of it. And again, this is such a nitpicky critique, but it's kind of like, I could take it or leave it. The rest of the book was kind of like, it fits, it works, and that was kind of this could have been a friendship and I'd get the same thing out of it, like that connect. I get she needed that connection to something to show that she isn't just a complete sociopath. But again, like, I could take or leave the romance aspect of it, and if that worked for some people, great. For me, it didn't really do anything. Other than that, it's a pretty solidly written book. Like, there's not really a lot to nitpick. There's a few little things, like we've talked about, that may or may not have worked, but I don't know where all the self-doubt is coming from. Maybe I'm channeling my inner Claire, but
yeah, Storm said escape pod getting picked up in isolation. Yeah, that wasn't really, to my memory, it wasn't really explained exactly how they found Claire in the escape pod.
Yeah, that That's a good point, Stormy. That's probably the closest thing to like a full-on plot hole that there is. I think the assumption is that the distress beacon was going the whole way, and she launched herself towards Earth a little bit faster than the ship and was picked up eventually. But the fact that that's something that could have done with just a smidge more explaining,
Yeah.
and it just is kind of left to the wayside. All right, so
I've got a question.
yeah.
So, if you were the company, what would you have done differently in the scenario where this ghost in the books, ghost ship comes back to haunt you in real life? It's obviously the company's plan blew up in their face, both physically and metaphorically. Would you have done things differently, or would you have done things exactly how they did it upon hearing that the ship was found?
Oh, upon hearing that the ship was found, I was going to say I would have been a lot more proactive. I would have gotten out ahead of it. I would have been sending people out way sooner. Like, I'm not going to trust that this isn't going to just float back into my life later down the road type of thing. But excluding that possibility, I would have cut my losses on finding the tech that fucked things up. I would have been like, incinerate it. Don't worry about trying to find it. Just fucking destroy the ship. Like from a sheer pragmatism standpoint, like I get you don't want to lose the research, but you were fine without it for whatever 20 fucking years it was floating.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was floating in space. You'll be fine without that technology, period. Especially when you know what it does and you know that it went haywire, the risk of your own people getting caught up in that is so high that why bother?
Yeah, I think if I was the company, and keep in mind, I am the company that is corrupt and greedy and evil, uh, I would have shot Claire into space and blown up the ship and blamed it on Claire and her crew for trying to activate a long dead spaceship.
Yep, exactly. Just blow it up. Don't fuck around with trying to figure anything out. Let it die.
Especially because, like, it's been 20 years. You telling me they haven't come up with a better technology for that sort of thing by then?
Yeah. Yes, Drake. Yeah. Blow it up, bring in a scrap crew to clean it up, and then kill the scrappers.
And then kill the guys who killed the scrappers. That way, your tracks are.
It just reminds me of the opening to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The people who are responsible for the sacking of the people who have been sacked have just been sacked.
Yes.
Yeah. I do like, however, that they brought in somebody that was as much a company man as Max was. Like
talk
that.
talk about detached personality, though, right?
Yeah, completely detaches himself from any sort of responsibility. Like, oh, well, I'm not the one who pulled the trigger, despite having put the gun in your hand and then told you that pulling the trigger would be the only way to not have 100 puppies die. Type of. Yeah, it's just business mentality. That was the perfect character to bring in to kind of like be that cleanup crew of there is not going to be a loose end because this person's only loyalty is to the company. And that, like, it's very similar to I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Serenity based on Firefly, but the guy that is sent in to kill River, it's that same dude who just believes, so yeah, that was the perfect character to bring in for that, and it was kind of
Who hasn't seen? There are people VS Drake.
Maybe not on this stream, but there are people.
I mean, I can't think of any right now, but oh wait, yeah, my kids have not seen Serenity.
Pretty sure my parents haven't, or if they have, they weren't paying attention. But that's also where I think, honestly, Serenity is where I got some of my theories about how this went down. A little bit.
I fully like, as soon as this book started and they found the ship, I was like, this is like Serenity. This is gonna be some corporation decided to do good and then fucked it up and killed everyone. And
except they never meant to do any good other than for their own bottom line.
Yeah, it turns out, not so much. They're just total assholes. Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't giving them that much credit, but like I had a similar thought of like this company did something that is fucking with these people, and
it's like, wouldn't it be great if we put dopamine in the water so that everybody on this cruise just had a super awesome time and then everybody dies?
Well, I mean, I think it was more than a practical joke, VS Drake. It was very clearly like subterfuge where they were trying to undermine the entire premise of this company. Like, yeah, it was supposed to be kind of on maybe a slightly more than practical joke level, but the fact that it turned into something way bigger and out of their hands, it's, it makes sense that sort of shit would happen. Yeah. It's like, what are we doing? Fucking around with this technology that we don't know exactly how it works, no matter what the circumstances. Oh, just some corporate espionage, yeah. Oh man. So on that note, other than Claire, and what did you think of how the secondary and tertiary characters were treated in this book?
Yeah, they all clearly had their own personalities. We didn't really get a ton of details on anybody except Claire and Kane.
We consider Kane a secondary character, so.
Yeah. I would have liked to have similar levels of details on the other characters whose names are escaping me currently. But at the same time, like, I get it, they weren't super relevant to the overarching plot. They had enough detail that it made it feel like a realistic reaction to the situation, especially considering you had like the gung-ho greedy guy who just wanted the money and didn't give two shits about stepping on graves, and then you had the we shouldn't be doing this, it's totally messed up and grave robbing personality. So yeah, kind of good mixed bag of personalities. Would have liked to see more about each backstory, but wasn't too disappointed that there wasn't more.
I honestly, like, there were only a couple characters that I might have liked to have seen more, just because I semi-liked their characters. Like Caddy was one I could have dealt with being a little bit more, because she actually seemed like kind of arguably the most grounded character aside from maybe Kane in the series, in this book. I do like how every character had a purpose. They played it through without being one-dimensional, like completely one-dimensional, or if they were one-dimensional, they kind of had to be. I guess like it just there wasn't enough time. Yeah, V.S. Drake, perfect. I like how Barnes didn't linger too long with anybody that didn't need to have a little bit more put into their character. Like, you may not like him, but that Reed guy, the one who's going to be the sacrificial lamb for the corporation, he's that entitled, stuck-up trust fund baby who thinks he's got all this shit figured out, where he needed a little bit more exposition in his character to show what he was about, why he was there. And I thought most of the side characters were treated fairly well with care for the most part. And I think that's kind of an understated skill for authors, is to make the side characters, while not necessarily being as prominent as the main character, still being important to the story.
Yep. I would agree.
Like, nobody felt completely obsolete in this book. And, I didn't feel like there needed to be more characters. I didn't feel like there necessarily needed to be fewer. Everything kind of made sense. All right, so...
Sounds like V.S. Drake agrees.
Yeah, you can make the background characters feel real without completely derailing the story just to give them a backstory. We got enough on the team, like the team that was in there for the rescue, why they were there, but we didn't need to know their names aside from the leaders of their group. Because, henchmen. That's a good way of putting it, V.S. Drake. No, there's no suspense of disbelief for adding in these characters in any way. So do you have, why don't you throw this out to chat? If you have any final questions, let us know. Adam, do you have anything else that you specifically wanted to talk about?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to talk about tonight. Talked about the corporation.
I'm pretty well good, so unless somebody comes up into chat, and we'll let you throw in a question if you want, but other than that, I think we can probably slide into our final impressions.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Oh, V.S. Drake, yeah, that's our final impressions. On the whole, what did we think of the book? There. Yeah, that's our final impressions. So why don't we just go right on into that then?
Right on. You want to go first, or shall I?
Well, I did the first impressions first, so you can do final impressions first.
Okay. I enjoyed the book. The delay. Sorry, I was reading V.S. Drake's comment about the delay. There's a slight delay between when comments show up, and then a delay between when we read them, and then a delay between when you hear us read them. So delayed internet's things. But anyway, I enjoyed the book. It had me wanting to listen for more. Definitely right up my alley kind of story. I liked that there was a technological, rational reason behind the events, and that it wasn't just aliens or goats. It was a really, really nice twist at the end with the whole when Claire was like, fuck it, and just shot the airlock or the walkway or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend this to my sci-fi pals. It was a good book. It wasn't too long. It left me wanting more by S.A. Barnes.
Yeah, it seems like Via Strake agrees, and Stormreed, they both really like the book, and they would highly recommend it, especially to sci-fi fans. There's, a good nod to the Titanic, but still feeling fresh and new. So sounds like they both agree. And honestly, I do too. Like I said, I'm usually not huge into horror because I either like classic horror because that set the precedent, or something that has to kind of hit me in a new way. And this one definitely hit me in a new way. So I am generally pretty particular about this stuff, but I thought this one was really well done. Characters are well fleshed out. Nobody feels extraneous or like they're just in there to be in there. None of the characters fell flat, and none were too one note that didn't need to be. There were parts that were to me predictable, but there was just enough twist to keep me going. And honestly, I cannot understate how well S.A. Barnes took Claire's character and her own self-doubt and again used it as a proxy to get us to feel self-doubt, to get us to figure out what's really going on. I am not sure what brown trout having that many chromosomes has to do with this book, but thanks, Contour.
Moving on.
Keeping on with our final impressions. I genuinely enjoy this book. I think anybody who enjoys horror of any kind would, like, whether you enjoy sci-fi or not, can enjoy what this book has to offer. So unless you actively hate sci-fi or actively hate horror, like I have a friend who honestly for their own mental health can't deal with horror, shy of something like that. I think this is a great read. It's compelling. And also having read the physical form and the audiobook, two completely different experiences. And whoever they got to do, I didn't look up the name, but whoever they got to do the audiobook did an excellent job, in my opinion, of bringing the characters to life in a way that was completely different than it was in my head, but the book does stand on its own as well.
Yeah. I think the narrator did a good job. It's always nice when you can tell the narrator's into the story too. It's like they put their their voice into it. How do I do the thing?
So apparently we have somebody who really didn't like this book, which is totally fine. Found it exhausting and painful slog through infuriatingly annoying protagonist's journey towards a lackluster twist and a cheesy as if ending. If that was your experience, it's totally valid. I don't fully understand why there's no horror that made you freak out. Well, I don't think this was meant to be like that kind of horror. Like, I think horror is a genre that kind of, in our day and age, has been kind of pigeonholed into having to be shock and awe or something completely disgusting. And I don't think that necessarily has to be it. I honestly like some horror movies that are just a slow burn and creepy as fuck. Yeah. And like for me, what made it horrifying for me was less the other stuff going on and more the freaking out that Claire was doing in her own head. Honestly, if it weren't for that, yeah, this could be a bit of a slog. But for me, the scariest parts were because of the main character and how she experienced them, not necessarily what was going on around her. And I think if that's not something that you can connect with, I can see how it would be not freaking. It's not a freak out type of book. They're like, we're inundated with enough stuff where I know there's plenty of people who see gouged out eyeballs and somebody puts a screwdriver through their head as not being all that horrific. And if that's the level of that's the kind of horror you want, then yeah, maybe this book isn't for you, because that's just not the kind of horror it is. And if that's what you're looking for, then yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to that type of person.
Yeah, jury kind of came in late tonight, but we are just wrapping up now. I would encourage you to join us sooner next time so that we can talk about some of your views. It seems like you did have a very fleshed out opinion on this book, and we definitely would like to chat about things, even if we have opposing views. Like Alex and I both just said, we really enjoyed the book, but it would be cool to listen to why, to discuss why we felt like the things you mentioned are not a deal breaker for us.
Well, yeah, and honestly, like, we do welcome opposing views. Like, it's part of what makes these comments interesting. And again, if we didn't get them so late in the show, we would love to engage with them more, but there are plenty of other ways to do that. You can go ahead and leave comments on our YouTube as well, and to an extent, we will go ahead and engage with those. And we have our other socials as well. So if you feel like chatting these things up, thank you, Cockshower. So yeah, if you feel like you had issues with that sort of thing, and you still want to talk about them, we fully welcome that, and we're fine with chatting beyond this. But for right now, we are gonna get wrapping up. But that's sorry. I just really like having. I know it's a completely opposing view, but I actually really like having somebody who comes through with a fleshed out view, and I'd love to discuss it more when we have a little bit more time, and it doesn't necessarily need to be on this. That's what DM's table is for.
Yeah.
It can go beyond the show. But seriously, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you sooner next time so we can engage with your opinions sooner and in more detail.
Yeah, sure thing. Let's do endgame stuff. It is kind of getting a little late here. We're running close to 10 o'clock. Next book is, so we already know about The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. That's for April 23rd. And after that, we will be reading our newly voted on book, Off to Be the Wizard by Scott Meyer, for May 7th. It's one of my personal favorite books, so looking forward to that.
I have never read either, but I've heard good things about the Midnight Library, and obviously from Adam, I've heard a lot about Off to Be the Wizard. I'm actually excited to read it. Also, again, a quick reminder, we are still doing our open voting, at least for our next book. So that means bring your wife, bring your kids, bring, again, that creepy neighbor from upstairs. We don't care. They all get to vote for our next book, and I believe that will be the last one on there. And then after that, we will be exploring some new themes, which I'll bring up on our next episode. If you have some suggestions for books or for themes, please feel free to drop them by us at any point. We may or may not use them, but we're always welcome them regardless of whether or not we use them. As long as they're not completely distasteful. But other than that, it's been a lot of fun doing this, and I hope that we get some more people voting for our next book. Again, they don't necessarily need to have read it, but if they want to tell us if they just like telling people what to do, bring them by.
With that, I'll throw some plugs your way. DMstable.com for everything about us. There you can find all of the information I'm about to reiterate to you in case you want to tune me out. New tab on the DMstable.com is DMstable.com/Etsy. That's that previously mentioned store. You should check it out. There's this magnetic Tetris thing on there. It's pretty dope. I have a set. It's so cool. It's on my fridge. I rearrange it every now and again. You should get one because it's cool. YouTube.com. Everybody knows what YouTube is. We have a YouTube page. We post all of our videos there. You should check it out. We're DM's Table on YouTube. Patreon, patreon.com/DMstable for previously mentioned voting, as well as if you want to throw us a few bucks so that we can keep the lights on. Facebook and Twitter are our primary socials. If you want to get in contact with us or want to see what we're doing next and stuff like that, check us out there. That's also where we post what books are next up in case you need a refresher. You can check out our Facebook and Twitter pages. Maybe give us a follow if you want it to just pop up on your own page. That's how those social medias work. On Facebook, we're at the DM's Table, and on Twitter, we're at DM's Table. Finally, we have a Discord. The Discord is cool. We chat about nerdy stuff. You should totally join us if you want to chat about nerdy stuff. To join us, hit us up on our socials, and we'll get you that Discord link.
That includes talking about theories that might come in a bit long and a bit late. So if that's probably the best place to do it. So hit us up. And again, the be nice or fuck off mentality extends to our Discord as well. Other than that, like I said, coming up, we're still doing our Everybody Gets to Vote, and we are looking for potential themes through the coming months. So if you have some ideas, bring them forward. Otherwise, we'll have some new ones for you coming up on our next episode. But other than that, thank you everybody for joining in. This was a fun one.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for joining us. Special shout out to Moose GG. Thank you for the follow. Thank you for the follow on Twitch. Hope to see you and interact with you in the future.
Oh, and a special shout out to the author herself, S.A. Barnes, for giving us a shout out on Twitter. That was super cool. I'm not sure if you ever made it in to see any of this, but if you do see this, whether it's now or on YouTube, that honestly meant so much to us. Thank you very much. And we love interacting with authors, so feel free to reach out to us as well. And, we're hoping to continue this going forward.
Yeah, so See you guys next book.
Yep.
Ah! I lost my book.